Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ryan and I'm a former Royal Marines Commando from the United Kingdom, and today we're going to be reacting to some content by a channel called William Spaniel. This individual who's created this video is very smart. Okay, I've watched about 30-40 seconds of this video and I thought, I need to react to this. It's going to have some good information in here, and just the sound of his voice. Okay, the guy sounds really smart. Check out his channel. All his links will be in the description. Go show him some love. All of that good stuff. Okay, without these people, we couldn't react to fantastic content like this. And at the end of the day, I like to broaden my horizons on the information that I receive. You know me, guys. I can talk till kingdom come on certain things. I might not always be right on the topic. So at the end of the day, watching other people's stuff, it broadens that horizon, and it engages the brain to think, I never thought of it that way. So we're going to get into this content, guys. But before we do, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and drop a comment if you want to speak to me. I do try and answer some of the more pertinent comments on the channel. It really does help out with engagement and stuff. And I know a lot of people actually turn off at the idea when YouTubers ask them to subscribe and like and all that good stuff. But without boring you too much, it really does help the channels out to grow. Okay, so yeah, that's that, guys. Goes without saying. But hopefully you enjoy the new setup. We're trying to improve it all the time. We've came a long way from 2 years ago when we first started the channel. So yeah, hopefully you can appreciate what we've done and how we're always trying to improve. But nevertheless, let's get straight into this fantastic reaction video. Let's go.
We are at about the 2-month mark of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That might not seem like much, but it's actually pretty deep into a war from a historical perspective. Prominent wars, the ones that receive the most attention in history classes, like World War I and World War II, are decidedly abnormal.
Yeah, and this is the thing as well with World War One and Two. I think I'm not saying we need to move away from World War One and Two. That would be ridiculous. But I've found in history classes, that's all we were taught when it comes to military war. That's it, right? These are the two great wars. There's nothing really else happened ever since, unless you took military history or anything. Then you would find out, the differences in war, in the wars that happen. I generally believe the schools nowadays should be teaching Iraq and Afghanistan as part of their history and military history. Should definitely be continuing to talk about World War One and Two, but the amount of knowledge, the amount of the amount we can get from learning from the mistakes and the successes of Afghanistan and Iraq, I feel can be really beneficial to the young generation growing up. And I think in some ways, if they found out how many people were affected by Afghanistan and Iraq, they would try and maybe grow up a little bit more reserved for war, a little bit more compassionate for the individuals who still live in society right now. I've got friends in their early 30s who served in Afghanistan, late 20s who served in Afghanistan. Still young men. Some of them suffer from the wounds, scars, and sacrifices that they saw on the battlefield over there. And we tend to forget about that. It's not just the old and grey who served in wars. We need to teach more on the subject. I know I'm talking a little bit more on this than probably is needed for a reaction video, but I just want to gauge your thoughts on that, guys. If you could drop a comment below if you think I'm right or wrong, it's okay. I generally think we should teach more World War, teach less World War stuff, more current, Afghanistan, Iraq, the pertinent parts of our society, and they've shaped many individuals who are still living very young today.
The vast majority of wars end within the first 300 days. And even within those wars, the most common durations are 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months. The current war is slowly heading in that direction. To understand why that might be happening, it will first help to zoom out and understand exactly what has occurred over the first 2 months of the war.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what his take is on this, because I'll be honest, I don't personally know what the answers are in reaction to why we are in Ukraine still, when some of the most fierce wars that we've ever witnessed have lasted only 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Look at the Falklands War that Britain was involved in. I've got friends, all right, although be a lot older than me, who served in that conflict, and that lasted, a couple of months. Didn't make it any less terrible than it was, but a couple of months it was over. The Argentines were defeated, and Britain, kicked their asses, and we went back home on ships and drank beers, and that's how it happened. So why is Ukraine any different? I don't know the answers to that at this moment in time. I guess this guy's going to have a good, firm stance on it.
With that in mind, here's a broad overview of the campaign so far. Russia initially had a three-front attack. Prior to the war, it had troops stationed in its own territory, in Crimea, which Russia had annexed 8 years earlier, and in its partner state, Belarus. The primary vector of attack appeared to be coming from the east, the Donbas front. This wasn't something new so much as an escalation of an ongoing conflict that started in 2014. Russia.
This is something that a lot of people haven't really considered as well. In every major conflict, in every big news article, you'll always get different narratives pushed onto people, and then suddenly, once the news springs into mind and starts giving information, you'll find that there's people suddenly become experts on things that never had an interest in it beforehand, all right, just because there wasn't that much news coverage on the whole situation. But Ukraine kind of kicked the arse out of the news over the first few weeks, especially. It was all over the place. And then there's people who's interested who didn't have a clue about the 2014 problems in Ukraine, Crimea, and how it was annexed by the Russians and all of that. They didn't have a clue because they weren't interested. So you do get, I don't want to call it glory supporters of things, but it's almost the same as glory supporting. It's big news now. Let's just follow this narrative. So it's interesting how this plays out.
Russia was not officially participating, but a large number of Russians were nevertheless fighting Ukraine on behalf of separatists. The second vector came from the south, the Crimean front. The motivation here was to secure a land bridge to and water access for the annexed territory. And there's also some oil down there. The final...
Okay, I didn't know about oil in the region. That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, especially the price of things at this moment in time. I'm sick of putting 100 and odd quid in my tank just to fill it up and not get very far.
The final vector is the Kyiv front. It came from the north and was not as obvious as the other two. As we have discussed in a previous video, it's still not exactly clear what Russia's motivation was here. It may have been a strategic effort to completely remove the Ukrainian government and occupy the territory.
Yeah, I can agree with that. What do you think? Do you think it was a strategic effort to remove the government? There's been a lot of different things spoken about with regards to Zelensky and the power that's in place in there. To me, it's clear that that's one of the intentions at the very least, guys. I'm going to speed this up a little bit, actually.
It may also have been a tactical decision. If Ukraine responded by focusing its defense on Kyiv, it would have made it easier for Russia to win battles in the south and the east, assuming that was Russia's goal all along. Either way, the strategy did not continue forever. By the beginning of March, the assault on Kyiv had stalled out, thanks to Ukrainian resistance. As the month continued, Russia made some slow progress in the south and east, but that was it. And by April, the northern offensive was officially a failure. Russia had retreated from the north and began reorienting their forces to battle in the other two theaters.
Yeah, Ukraine did a remarkable job with holding certain areas in Kyiv. I do think, and I don't want to say the word lucky, candidly, I want to, they had a few things happen with regards to Russia failing in certain areas, massively lacking logistical expertise, as we spoke about this so many times on the channel, as they've proven time and time again in war. Their logistics is just absolutely shocking. They never really seem to get that right. I'm not sure why the answer to that is. There's been talks about, military leaders feeding back certain information to Putin and him being happy with that, and it's not necessarily been the case, not necessarily being the whole truth. There's talks about money laundering, money being stolen, taken here, taken there, not actually being pumped into the military, nowhere near as much as it should have been against Putin's will. And, the military as a result is actually less effective than he originally thought, than we, the world, originally thought, leading to massive failures at very, very basic stuff. We talk about logistics in the military. I understand how logistics works. It's something that gets, if it gets overlooked, then nothing else works. All the way down from the worst of your jobs, all the way up to the tier 1 special forces elements. Without logistics, none of it works as well as it should do. So logistics is something that's, very easy to get right, but also very easy to get wrong. And I think it's the getting wrong bit that Russia hasn't really learned many lessons over the wars that they've fought, especially the likes of Afghanistan, especially. But yeah, I think they had a bit of luck in Kyiv with regards Russia's failings, if anything. But the resistance in Kyiv was also very, very strong, which goes a long way.
Ordinarily, this turning point might be where a war would end. It's best to think of wars as a result of bargaining breakdown. A reasonable interpretation of what we have seen so far is as follows. Russia thought it was relatively likely to win the war. To represent that here, imagine that this white line reflects Russia's expected gains from the conflict, as estimated on the eve of fighting. Because war is costly, Russia would have been willing to accept something less. We can use this red line to represent that. The space between these lines is how Russia would internalize the loss of life and resources in terms of square kilometers. It's possible that Ukraine knew that Russia's estimates were wrong, that the true balance of power based on Russia's strategy was something over here.
Yeah, and the estimates based on what we've seen so far those estimates will have been based off intelligence, and the intelligence came from mostly, in my humble opinion, America, the United States of America, the best intelligence service in the world outside of the likes of MI5, MI6. It could be argued China as well. I mean, if you look at China, for instance, slightly off topic, I believe the average agent training is like 5 years or something ridiculous like that. I might be wrong. Double check and let me know in the comments on that, compared to, I don't know, 9 months in the United Kingdom. But nonetheless, our intelligence services have proven themselves time and time again, year in, year out, decade in, decade out. So intelligence, that's the reason they'll have knew their estimates and been able to capitalize on that as well. If they've overestimated and the intelligences came in to stipulate that, they're going to be able to, have effective countermeasures in place, ready to capitalize on that fact.
War is costly for Ukraine as well, and thus there was room to negotiate on their end. Unfortunately, the key thing is that the most Ukraine might have been willing to negotiate over was insufficient from Russia's perspective.
I personally think Russia's just got too cocky, too big for the boots. I don't see what their reasoning is for that either. Over the past few years, they've bullied their way into Crimea. They've done what they needed to do there against the will of many people. Individual civilians and countries have all been against a lot of their actions recently. They've getting away with things to a certain degree, and they've just got too big for the boots, as far as I'm concerned. Now, there's many people agree and disagree with various aspects of this war, but you can't argue the fact that Russia have overestimated themselves in this. I think massively. They've overestimated the fact that they didn't think that Ukraine would potentially get neighbouring support from NATO, indirect or direct. I think they overestimated their strengths and underestimated Ukraine's strengths, which has led to a long drawn out war, in my opinion. Based off this guy's information as well, it makes a lot of sense why this war is potentially gonna, I personally think, drag itself out for a long period of time, leading in a stalemate almost. And in 10-20 years, we'll all have forgotten about it. It'll be something where, remember that happened? Yeah, in the end it just fizzled out. But I might be wrong. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, troops.
Bargaining was doomed to break down, and that's how you get war. Now that we have some hindsight, it is clear that Russia's estimates were wrong on many dimensions. it appears that Putin didn't realize how unprepared Russia's military infrastructure was to handle the war, or how much average Ukrainians would resist Russian invaders.
So this is what I was hitting on earlier. Putin had an expectation of his military, a very strong expectation. But if you look at how much they've pumped into their military financially over the years, a lot of money's went into the budget for Russia, making it seem that they're an absolute global terrifying superpower. On paper, there should be the amount of money that's been invested, but it just hasn't lived up to that. Hasn't lived up to that expectation. Now, there has been talks, and we hinted on to this. I think I was reading an article somewhere, whether it's propaganda or not. The article was quite interesting, and it was stating that potentially a lot of this money is not went into the military at all. It's went into people's back pockets, and there's been a lot of cash took from that pot illegitimately. Now, it's worked out in Ukraine's favor. It's worked out in the world's favor by that happening. The military isn't as strong as it should be in comparison to its budget, but it's interesting to say the least that is a possibility. That is something that might have happened. I think if that has happened, then it shows the true state of affairs in the higher echelons of the Russian society. The people in power are corrupt as hell. We all know it, and it's they might actually be more corrupt than we once thought, which is terrifying and satisfying at the same time.
In that regard, the last 2 months have been revelatory about the balance of power, at least to some degree. Russia realized that the attack on Kyiv was a mistake and regrouped accordingly, turning its attention elsewhere. Ordinarily, this would make brokering a settlement relatively straightforward. Indeed, this is why so few wars last a long time. Once you realize what's going to happen in the war, you can just implement that without having to pay further costs.
Yeah, true.
Here, Russia is no longer under the impression that this is the actual balance of power. And yet the fight continues. If we think a little more about why Russia miscalculated to begin with, we can get a better understanding of why that is the case. Autocratic leaders like Vladimir Putin can have a difficult time obtaining accurate information from their own intelligence agencies about the best path forward on foreign policy. Imagine that you were one of his advisors, and you knew that the military was unprepared to handle the war. Do you tell Putin the bad news?
This is the thing. We take for granted living in democracies, or at least I have that privilege living in United Kingdom. But the leadership model is very different in Ukraine, and you can say it's not really fear. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not really dedicated to fear, but there's an element of fear in their leadership style. And would you personally want to risk losing your job or your life to be able to stand up to the likes of Putin even if you're faced with a massive mistake in terms of what we've seen in Ukraine? Massive mistakes have taken place, but it shows that leadership style doesn't really work. You just surround yourself with what I would call a yes man. Just, yes, boss, anything you say, boss, yeah, you're right, no matter what, even though he's not right. Putin could be walking straight ahead into a trap. Am I walking the right way? Yes, boss, right way. Why? Because if you say the wrong thing, you might get your life taken from you. And that's just proven that the way he leads his country, it might be effective in many ways, but in the ways where it count, he's surrounded himself with the wrong people. He's surrounded himself with yes men and women, and this is what happens. Mistakes has led. I'd rather be part of a society where, there might be a little bit of corruption here, there, and everywhere, but at the end of the day, we get to vote in, we get to have our say, and we get to have a debate over it at the very least, And you can be rest assured there's not really a fear element in British government. There might be a little bit in certain areas, but, no one's losing their lives over decision making. That's the important thing.
In a place where there's weak rule of law, you'd probably think twice. Indeed, this was a significant problem for Saddam Hussein at the end of his administration.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about Saddam Hussein. Pretty much the same thing happened, really, with regards of his leadership style. Very, very much an authoritarian figure. Bang, I'm doing it my way. People around him were, to say the least, shit scared of that man.
It's hard to get good information when everyone fears for their lives. It hasn't helped that over the past 2 years, Putin has been extremely frightened about contracting COVID. If if you have seen some of these silly photos of Putin at a very long table.
Well, I didn't know that he had it makes obvious sense. You know, everyone was scared of the C word at one point, but I didn't think he would have been as well. I mean, look at the size of that table. Yeah, the man probably is paranoid. You know, when you lead the way he leads, when you've done the things he's done, you got to forget. You can't forget one thing. This man was in the intelligence services for like 16 years. All right, so behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence under horrific circumstances in many cases that these individuals subject to. Quite scary jobs in some ways. All right, not in all, but yeah, a paranoid mind. We see that in dictators, don't we? I say dictator, you know, you get where I'm coming from. Adolf Hitler was exactly the same. He led with pure, brute, violent force, and he was paranoid as hell. All right, he couldn't trust nobody. Couldn't trust himself, I think, and that's the problem with this. Can Putin trust himself at this moment in time, in old age, in alleged ill health? I don't know, guys.
That's the reason why he's so far away. It's also why he has taken a lot of meetings remotely. All that isolation means that Putin is not making as well-informed of decisions as he might be able to do otherwise, which was a broader concern when the pandemic originally began. And to some degree, it has gotten worse since the war started, as now Putin must be more worried about coup threats than he was before. But the war itself has given Putin all of the proof he needed that the original plan was awful. That's why Putin has reportedly purged some of his advisors. This all means that Russia and Ukraine have solid information about how a broad-scale war would play out. However, that is no longer the war that is being fought. It's an entirely separate question of what the balance of power looks like here, where the entire confrontation is focused on the south and the Donbass. The good news is that Kyiv is no longer in play, and as a result, the difference in beliefs has undoubtedly narrowed by now. That will make it easier for the parties to negotiate a solution. But the change in tactics will slow that process down, meaning that more lives will be lost in the meantime.
Which brings me to something that I've spoken to you guys about for quite a bit. And if you watch the channel, guys, you'll know I've got quite my moral stance on things is a lot stronger than many would suspect a former military guys to be. Okay, but I really do think an awful lot about the cost of human life, and I genuinely believe that there's no war out there ever can be justified as being morally sound enough to risk human life. And the fact that this is going to get long drawn out, according to this fine video's explanation, just to end in the result of maybe a solution. Well, all of the people who came before and died just to get to that solution, it's like, well, can we not just cut the crap? Let's have talks now. What do you want? What's the expectations? But that's the thing. No one wants to give. No one wants to give, and when no one wants to give, you're talking about egos that are in place. It's all about egotism, all right? Egotistical natures of people in power. And the shame with this is it's gonna be drawn out. People are gonna lose their lives. It's gonna be people who are in the military just to feed their families with little money that they've got. And yeah, for what? For what, man? For a decision to be made in the first place, it's just sickening as far as I'm concerned.
This is rough from Ukraine's perspective. They are essentially having to pay the price for how poorly run the Russian government is by sticking it out.
Fantastic video, guys. Let me get the name of that channel again. It is William Spaniel. Now, this guy I think his videos are fantastic. I'm going to actually look through a few of his videos now and see if there's anything else I can react to. But just to give you a bit of a narrative on him, I'm going to read his description of his channel. He says he's an assistant professor of political science at the University of Pittsburgh. So this guy knows exactly what he's talking about, okay? Not just me who's making assumptions on things and trying his best to scour through information and make do of it as I wish. This guy knows what he's talking about. Previously, he was a Stanton Nuclear Security postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University for International Security and Cooperation. So he's a very, very bright man. He received a PhD in political science from the University of Rochester in 2015 and is also the author of Game Theory 101, the complete textbook. Go check his channel out. Go have a look at his stuff. If it's okay with him, I would like to react to a lot more of his stuff. But as far as intellectual individuals come making content on YouTube, I'm happy that this person's making this type of content, and yeah, if I'm okay to react to more of his stuff, I certainly will. But go check him out. I'll put the link to the original video where you can collect his details from there, guys. But if you liked the content today, if you liked the format of the way we were doing things, it would help me out if you smash that like button. If subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you check if your notifications are actually on, because a lot of people have been complaining lately that their notifications haven't been on. Not sure why that is. I think, it's just the way YouTube works sometimes. But yeah, other than that, troops, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for stopping by. Take it easy. Much love from me. Peace.